So once again, good morning, everyone who is accompanying us today to this panel from the regional panel migration. We are in a program of on training on migrational policies that is done with the support of IOM and also with the contributions from the Mesoamerican program uh, sponsored by the PRM from the United States. So this morning we have the online session number two, focus on policies. As you know, this program started about 2 weeks ago with the first opening panel that we had 2 weeks ago, an online session, and a week ago as well. And today we have the use of evidence in policy. So we are very warm greeting to everyone with us today that traditionally are not in the PRM events, but institutions like planning that contribute to the countries, to the government institutions on policies, and especially on migration policy. I really want to thank everyone who has joined us to the eCampus and that have taken the courses that are enabled to you on the eCampus. And we hope that this training program is of tremendous benefit and being used by all the countries for the formulation and implementation of your migration policies. So these are the technical indications that I had to do. So I pass the floor to Fabio Jimenez from IOM, who will facilitate and mediate or moderate rather this session, and then I will come back to you for other questions and comments that you might have. So we are at here in case you have any questions during the session through the chat. So thank you very much and good morning. Thank you so much, Luis Alonso. Thank you so much, everyone, for connecting to this second online session from this training program. I want to share very briefly a presentation, especially just to introduce or present the colleagues. Can you just confirm if you see the presentation? Yes, we can see it perfectly. Well, as you well know, like Luis actually mentioned, we are in the framework migration policy framework. And I just want to remind you what we actually did the first days, and we're going to do today, and especially how we what we're going to do for the next week. We started on July 22nd with the international panel on measures on the migration and governance on migration adopted by the different countries in different parts of the world. We on the July 29th, that's last week, we did online session on design on migration policies and the different guiding principles that the countries might be able to consider in the design of these types of policies. And just to remind you that it's very important that as part of the program, those people that have been designated by your respective government, so we incite you or motivate you that to actually complete the course on trends on migration in Latin America. So these three components actually sent us to the design of these policies. So today is the use of evidence, the use of data in the implementation and follow-up and evaluation. So there's a second online course based on this topic, and we're going to listen to two presentations quite interesting on the governance indicators on migration and the analysis of migration governance from IOM. Then after the presentations, we will listen to the application of those tools in two member countries by Dominican Republic and also Costa Rica with two experiences in this. So today we will focus on how to use the data in the implementation of migration policies to follow up on the policy or to assess the effects of these policies. So next Wednesday, we will wrap up with this program with a third online session dedicated to the cross-cutting across topics of migration. So we'll see like migration, labor, gender, and health and migration. So this is kind of like the logic that we've actually followed, and we've actually developed throughout these sessions. So we will focus on the use of evidence and integral focus on policies. So these are the answers of one of the questions that we the pre-test, the pre-test that we actually did that you actually carried out. So one of the questions we actually asked to indicate at least three topics related to this program that we should deepen in the different sessions. And as you can see, the diversities of topics, border management, return and reintegration, labor migration, protection assistance, migration data, health, irregular migration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I show you this graph just to remind you the complexity of migration governance and the need of data in different areas, in several areas. And because why is it important to have tools that allow us to actually gather this information? So without further ado, let me present to you two esteemed colleagues that are going to carry out the presentations on the different governance indicators and analysis on needs. So we're going to start the presentation with Rudy Maxwell. Rudy, he's the main official from the liaison and policy officer from the regional office of IOM for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. He is based here in San Jose, Costa Rica. He has a master's degree in sociology, political science, and geography as well. He's actually worked for IOM in different capacities, different roles in North America, Central America, Europe, and Southeast Asia as well. Rudy, it's a pleasure to have you over here with us today morning. Thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours for your presentation. So if it's okay with you, when there's about 5 minutes left, I will let you know. Okay? Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Fabio. Thank you so much, Luis Alonso. Good morning, colleagues from San Jose, Costa Rica. And I'm going to share my screen with you. A quick presentation that I have for you on the different indicators on migration governance. So I expect that you can see my presentation. Yep, we can see it. Excellent. Okay, so thank you so much. So a quick brief of the agenda, my presentation actually. First off, what are the migration governance indicators? Exactly what's the process to actually attain those results that the indicators actually propose? What are the benefits of these IGMs or migration the IGMs? And I also want to highlight very briefly exactly that we have also indicators of migrational governance at the local level. So, but exactly what are migrational governance indicators? If you ask me exactly what are these MGIs or migration governance indicators, I would have to say that these are tested tools and recognized tools to facilitate a dialogue on migration governance based on evidence. And this fourth presentation, we will delve into each of the aspects that I just mentioned in this definition. So last week, you actually heard the conceptual framework of what a good migration governance is all about, and most likely you would recall about the elements, basic elements, the 6 basic elements, the 3 principles, and the 3 objectives that actually form the conceptual framework of a good migration governance. It's adhesion to international standards and the respect of the rights of migrants. Second, to formulate migration policies based on evidence. And third, to collaborate with partners nationally and locally and among countries. These are the 3 fundamental principles to contribute the migration governance. But for what purpose? Well, first off, to foster the social economic well-being of migrants and of society of destination and origin. We have to approach issues relative to different aspects in crisis and to ensure that migration is actually carried out in a safe orderly, and dignified and regular way. So with that said, the migration governance framework is a conceptual framework that is based basically it's based on other global frameworks, but basically on the SDGs, especially on 10.7, on goal 10.7. So we'll go into a bit more detail in the on the MGIs, or migration governance indicators. It's a cluster of 90 indicators that cover 6 dimensions on migration governance. We've actually seen the different 6 elements. Uh, this is a methodological framework to assist in the different structures on this migration governance, and presents it presents in a brief report on these results. Now, just to give you a specific idea on how can we actually measure this migration governance, on this slide, you can see first off the 6 key elements that provide the MGI framework, and under each element or each goal and principle, there is a list of aspects that we have to approach to ensure that the governance, migration governance, is a good migration governance. For example, if we apply international standards, but exactly what does that actually entail? Well, it's access to basic social services and social security, family rights, labor rights, or for example, in point number 6 is to ensure a safe, orderly, and dignified migration. Exactly what does that mean? Well, to control from borders and the application of the law, criteria of admission and admissibility. So these are it's an itemized topics that we need to approach or to address to actually measure migrational governance. And on this slide, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I would like to show you a little bit about the types of questions that we need that are actually part of the indicators on migration governance, and based on which we actually collected or gathered information. And we have indicators and a discrimination of what we're actually looking for, or what we do, or when you actually do an exercise of the different governance. So exactly what are the 3 key attributes and of these? So this is a voluntary process. This is something that a government, either a national government or a local government, decides upon. So we actually want to do this, and in a few slides we'll see exactly why would we want to do these types of exercises. Second, it's a consultative process. So it's not something that we actually do, or that IOM does, or someone else does independently. No, but rather it's something that we actually do in a process, in a consultative process. And the third element is a framework, or it's a tool rather, that's adapted to the specific local specifics or national specifics. So what exactly is the process? So you can see the summary of this process. Mainly, these are 4 steps. First, it's the rollout of the MGIs. So it's a consultation with the governments to explain a little bit about what it is about, what's the objective, and what the process entails. Once Once we have the approval by the government, then we start to collect and analyze the data. And we have a partner that actually helps us to collect this part of the process. And it's the Economy Intelligence Unit. And the third step is the most important step. I think it's a interministerial meeting to see and analyze and digest the results from this analysis and from this data collection. And based on this, then we generate a brief report, normally uh, which is published, and normally a more detailed report for the government. At the very beginning, I said that it's a process uh, that's well recognized, and you can see over here that the different countries that have carried out an exercise from these MGIs, or migration governance indicators, and highlighted in yellow are the countries from the RCM. But you can see there are quite many other countries who have done and participated in this process. And I also mentioned that the results are actually posted, or published rather, on the data world portal, and it's a small summary that identifies the advances or progress that a country has done on this matter, but also the different gaps that they might have seen. So exactly, what are the benefits from the migration governance indicators, or MGI? So we've actually mentioned the idea of migration governance and migration in general is a cross-cutting issue. It's not just the governance ministry or from the foreign affairs office, but the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the labor ministry, everyone. So it's a cross-cutting issue, and this is actually reflected in the SDGs, and we have direct links to a few SDGs, for example, for mobility and student mobility, people smuggling and trafficking, remittances, and also data on migration. So there's transversal topics or issues in regards to the SDGs and migration as well. So this, in other words, the results of an exercise of the MGIs provides key data for analysis from the UN on the country, which is the main data to develop these frameworks for the SDGs. And also it reports strategies and migration policies. You have 5 minutes, Rudy? So this is the very last slide that I have, just to mention that we have carried out a pilot. We have carried out exercises on governance of these MGIs at the local level. We've carried this out in 3 different cities, one in Montreal, Canada, the other one which is Accra, Ghana, and in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And why are we offering this type of exercise? Well, because we will know that migrants many times actually go directly to the cities, and the cities are the local authorities. They had to deal with the impact of migration and therefore they also need tools to actually address the different challenges and the opportunities that come with migration. So the main idea, if you will, is the same of actually seeing exactly what I mean that the local authorities, do they have the necessary tools to address migration at the local level, and of course the questions and such are actually adapted to this concept. So it's an adaptation, if you will, of the MGIs at the local level. Also, to actually facilitate the dialogue among the local authorities or provincial authorities, of course, depends on the country, of course, and of the authorities, of the national authorities, actually. So just to recap, so exactly what are the MGIs? It's a tested and recognized tool. It facilitates a local and national dialogue on migration governance based on evidence, and it actually provides key data for strategic documents. So in this regards, thank you so much, and I'm here for any questions or comments you might have. Thank you so much, Rudy. As your presentation was quite clear, and I'm very happy to see that you actually indicated or highlighted the adaptation that's being done with this locally. So we're doing with this with a few countries that are here present. So let me introduce to you. So if we can invite the participants. If you have any specific question in this regard on the MGIs from Rudy's presentation, you might want to wait to the end of the panel, and then we can actually ask the questions, or you can actually write it down in the chat section, in the messaging section, and we can actually take note of your questions. Okay, so now we'll go to our very esteemed colleague Estela Aragon, so she can actually do a presentation on the needs on MGIs. Estela, she is the research officer from the IOM Regional Program on Migration, Mesoamerica and Caribbean. She has a master's in development economics from the University of Sydney. She has over 10 years in managing economic development, migration, and research projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. She is based here in San Jose, Costa Rica. She coordinates the research unit of the regional program on migration here. She develops different projects, research projects at the national level, and also related to migration. So as a specialist in the research area, she supervises the design, administration, and execution of studies, and provides technical advice and support to the IOM national offices. And on this matter, thank you so much, Giselle, for being here with us. And please, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Fabio. Good morning, everyone. So when you have 5 minutes left, I will let you know, okay? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So just let me know, Fabio, if you can see my presentation. Can you see my screen? Yes, we see it perfectly. Excellent. So good morning, everyone. I'm gonna mention, like Mafia said, on another study that is actually based on the framework on migration governance from IOM that is called the Analysis on Needs of Migration Governance. So this study actually came out in 2018 with the goal of actually giving general data on structures and policies on governance on migration, identify the priority needs to strengthen the capacities of the government to manage these migration flows. The first study in 2018 was carried out in 10 islands of the Caribbean, which are the ones that you see listed here. The result was a regional report and 10 country reports. So very briefly, I'm going to describe the methodology that we actually follow in the study. As I actually mentioned, we have the methodology in study as based on the main frameworks that actually govern migration governance topics, especially the program that Rudy actually mentioned. So the first step as part of the methodology, of course, it's a bibliographical revision, which is to review the different literature and documentation that exists on matters of migration in the different countries that we're actually studying. This implies a review of the national legislation, official national reports, and those developed the UN and other UN agencies. Now, based on this information that we actually have in the literary review, we complete a survey, a baseline survey that's following the MiGOF principles. We actually group in 6 topic areas. So we'll see this later on, but includes migration policies, health, emergency management, and others that we'll see later on. The survey is binary questions. Binaries, questions that are answered with yes or no. There are approximately 286 questions. However, this can vary from country to country because sometimes, depending on the context, that are not as relevant, or other questions that are quite important that we need to add these. So the methodology provides the flexibility to do some sort of adjustment, that there's always consistency between the analysis among the countries, but also there's a capacity of contextualization. Now, not all questions of the survey can actually be completed with a bibliographical review or revision, rather. So the questions that are not completed in this process are actually taken in a protocol to review semi-structured interviews. These interviews are actually face-to-face. A few of them are actually done remotely. Depending on the capacities that they have. And so it's from the Ministry of Labor, and of course the different directions of migration. We also do questions with the UN agencies, including the UNICEF, ILO, UNHCR, and also with civil society agencies and representatives of the academia. Now, based on these different sources of information, primary and secondary, we actually have a drafted report. This draft is submitted to the governments for their validation. And this, they have the opportunity of actually correcting any incorrect data, provide more information. They probably did have the opportunity to actually say that in their interview, we assist IOM officials to actually cross information and cross-reference data. And with this, we actually generate the final reports. Another important aspect of this methodology, and it's a measure to ensure the quality of the data, it's the triangulation. In this way, we should triangulate the method, sources, and
políticas en relación a residencia y ciudadanía, por ejemplo, yo muy fácilmente puedo irme a ese capítulo y encontrar lo referente a residencia y ciudadanía. Entonces, de esa manera,
so these are sorted in 6 topics, like you see at the right-hand side: migration policies, border management and migration, migration in emergency and natural threats, protection of migrants, migration health, labor migration, and human development. So at the same time, each of these chapters are actually divided in 3 subsections. That we'll see this over here. So this is a photograph that was done of a report that was done in 2018. As you can see, this of course is it's in one slide. It has a first section, a narrative section that actually describes the panorama of the topic addressed by the chapter. For example, in border management, for example, they say what are the institutions that are in charge of carrying out the border management, of actually dealing with the border management of the country. Exactly what is the legislation that governs the topic, and then we go into specifics. For example, how the border management actually works, what includes, what doesn't include, passports, among others. We also include tables with information a little bit more specific. For example, the international treaties that which are actually relevant for this. And then we include 2 pages, includes sections with subtopics that actually summarizes the narrative included in the first stages. And then we include tables with identified needs. As you said, this is an example of a report in 2018 that was presented needs, identified needs by government representatives and by IOM. In different reports that we're doing for this year in 2020, we include another table with identified needs by other stakeholders, by civil society and by the academia. So limitations of the methodology. As you well know, all methodology has its limitations, and it's important to actually recognize these and to take them into consideration when we actually review the reports. First off, we had the access difficulty to informants and key documents. This, I think, happens with any research, at least in my experience. Sometimes we simply don't have key informants for an interview. They're not available for this. In this case, we have a few sections of the reports in which sometimes we simply can't manage to carry out this interview. And we use other sources like civil society, that can, the academia, for example, and we can also use specialists from IOM that can help out with this. But this does occur sometimes. And in this case, the reports, we actually include a type of footnote in the cases that we simply did not manage to actually have a governmental aspect of this. Not in the majority of cases, but it's one of the limitations, and it's something that's actually happened. And of course, it might happen in the future as well. Another limitation is the absence of analysis or interpretation. These are more factual, so they actually present what they have and what is not there, not necessarily an analysis of the situation. In other words, that for an audience that maybe they want an analysis or an interpretation of this, it's not something that necessarily they're going to find in this type of reporting. Quick updating of data. So the circumstances of each country actually evolve, and sometimes they evolve quickly, and not necessarily the data that their report, once it's published, are actually current and valid. Of course, this is a challenge for any investigation or research. This is something that we're trying to address for the other phase of the program. I will talk about the initiative that we're actually working on right now. Then the triangulation of sources on all topic areas. We actually try to contrast between the academia and civil society. There's certain aspects of migration governance in which not necessarily we actually find agents from civil society or from the academia working on this. One of these, for example, is the border system management. Not necessarily are going to have specialists in the academia that actually knows about this, which is quite technical, or agents from civil society that actually knows about this as well. Difficulty to actually to maintain a brief and not include important data. So this is a challenge with countries from Mesoamerica in which we should have governance systems that are actually quite complex. So you have 5 minutes. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. Like uses and benefits of the report. I think that we've talked about this. The report is actually divided by topics or by themes, rather, to be easy to analyze. The report does not present a qualification or analysis of a country. And one of the main aspects is that it actually identifies needs according to several stakeholders, which allows the governments or different stakeholders to see exactly what should be prioritized by each of the sectors. Also, it's very useful for the design, implementation, and evaluation, depending on the stages of the development stages of these in each of the countries. And quickly, let me skip over to the examples from 2020. In this moment, we're actually developing 10 different reports, so we hope that actually completed by the end of this year. 8 of these are in countries from the RCM, and this is a quick survey for you. I actually want to ask you, which of these 8 countries do you believe that you have a migration approved migration policy, which is the countries. Okay, so we'll have participants. You'll see in the right-hand side of your screen we have polls. You'll see a quick. You see an icon with a question. So if you can actually answer that question and vote on that question that Estella just made, please. So how many of you have an approved migration policy? So and just send your questions to this poll, please. So the question is, how many of you have an approved migration policy? For the question, Mexico says approved by whom? Can you specify that? I mean, what do you mean by approved migration policies? At what level? Approved by the state. In the development of policies, of course, the policy goes through a review process and a approval process as well. So it would be approved by the government as a public policy, actually. Perfect. So recognized at the government level, at the executive government level. So Renan, can you please actually let's close the poll and see the results of this poll then. Very well. So can we show the results? Can you see results? Can you read them out to me? Well, yes. Look, it says that zero people responded that all 8 countries do not have an approved migration policy. 10 people said that 5 countries have approved migration policies, and 9 people said that three countries have an approved migration policy. So the majority was 5. Okay, thank you so much, Fabio. So according to the results from our studies from these 8 countries, only 3 of these actually have a duly approved migration policy. However, 4 of these countries are in the process of approval, and they're just right in the very last steps of validation of that policy. And only 1 has not started with the development of the policy, which represents that there is a very important base in regard to the importance that countries actually see in the development of specific policies on migration issues. Another important aspect that I want to highlight is that all 3 countries that already have these approved policies also have action plans for its implementation and for monitoring of these policies. Another aspect which is quite important is that all these 8 countries have mechanisms of coordination between ministries, which is fundamental to foster and follow up on the development of these policies on migration. So I know that my time is up and I'm in the very last slide. And as the next steps that I actually mentioned before, for phase 11, one of the projects that we actually have is to generate a digital dashboard on the government's this. We have a baseline of almost 300 questions, and many of this data that's generated by this are not included in the report. So the idea is to generate a dashboard that presents the information from all countries in a digital way that can actually, we can see this graphically and a bit more accessible. And this would actually allow us to actually update our data in real time. And so this is my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Any questions you might have, please let me know. Thank you very much, Stella. Your presentation is quite interesting of how to use this risk assessment and how we're doing this in several countries. So I want to thank the participants. I know this poll has generated a lot of interest. And if you want, because of the time, we are going to continue with the presentation of Dominican Republic and Costa Rica, because the thing is that we're going to see exactly how the methodologies from the MGIs and what from the needs assessments that are applying in the countries currently, and how these applications actually face different limitations. And so we'll see from the theoretical and we'll go to the reality. So if you have this open, we can actually see these questions from the participants in the section of Q&A at the end of our presentation. So thank you much, Stella and Rudy. So we'll pass the floor right now to Juan Arias. Juan Arias, he actually accompanies us today in this panel. Juan Antonio Arias Tejeda. He's the director from the Coordination Direction of the National Statistical System from the National Office of Statistics from Dominican Republic. He is responsible of coordinating, normalizing, and supervising all the processes related to the strengthening of the National Office of Statistics at the national level, as well as the elaboration of statistical products with disaggregated data and the minor administrative divisions, strengthening the statistic production from the states and other activities that has the objective of satisfying the needs of the use of this information and these statistics that have different users in the Dominican Republic, including that information which is produced and collected by the National Office of Statistics. Juan, thank you so much for being in this panel and for your willingness to be here. And you had the floor for your presentation. Please let me know if you need help to do the presentation or to show the presentation, or can you do that directly. Thank you much, Fabio. I can share this directly. Thank you so much. So just I'll let you know we have 5 minutes left. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Juan, you can actually share it if you want. Give me 1 second. Just let me know if you can see my presentation, please. Just let me know how to do this. Yeah, in the upper right hand side, you'll see a button that says share screen. You need to click on that button, and there we go. Now we can see your presentation. Excellent. Okay, so very well. Well, before anything else, I want to thank your invitation and the opportunity that you actually provided us to share our experience that we've had in Dominican Republic in the implementation of the different indicators on migration governance. In this case, the adaptation that at the beginning we actually did for Dominican Republic through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is the official body of our country on matters on migration, and they're the ones who truly actually carried out the assessments, corresponding assessments on the migration governance in our country. So we actually accompany them in the second stage in a whole process of validation of the MGIs. So in this regard, I must indicate the different processes that were actually used by the ministry, in which through the Technical Commission, Interinstitutional Institute, and from the Dominican Republic, the one in charge precisely on presenting the different aspects that has to do with migration through the ministry. So this commission formed in July 2016, 2017, by 125 institutions actually was approved the MGIs, and of course this is accompanied with the IOM that helped us with accompaniment along this process during the management of the CTIM, and that year was the approved the validation for the MGIs in 2007, and back then we had a baseline in 2013 actually. So the commission had several institutions who actually led the process. Among this, there was a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We also had in a transversal way, we had the responsibility of actually knowing the entire process. We have the Ministry of the Interior and Police, the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development, and the National Office of Statistics. Each one of these institutions actually were responsible for each of the axes that were proposed for the process of actually gathering and validation of the MGIs for 2017. As I actually mentioned, the MGI is actually comprised by 91 questions that were actually carried out for such purpose. So of course that we need these questions in a few cases were actually modified due to the fact that we were not present back then, and they were actually validated by the National Statistics Office. So they have 27 indicators and 67 sub indicators divided in six greater or major categories, like I mentioned before, that are called domains. Now, for this purpose in 2013, the assessment actually passed by 5 domains that had the institutional capacity and the rights of migrants and the integration of migrants, migration management, everything that had to do with labor, economy, and investment, and of course the cooperation and international and regional cooperation and alliances. After this, due to the provision that we actually did in 2017, these domains were actually modified and adapted according to the guidelines that were seen internationally, and the comparison according to the different trend that was seen back then. So back then, this index or the indicator, this index was the different domains were actually actually modified. Actually, the first had to do with the adhesion to international standards and the respect of the rights of migrants, the formulation of a comparison of policies comparison applied to the integral government. I'm not going to read all of them, but it's just for each of these cases. We needed to visit each of the institutions to see gather the information, and this, of course, was done as my colleague from Costa Rica, she mentioned, was done through a process of data gathering or collection. So, of course, respecting the statistical process actually entailed to actually have an instrument to collect data, staff training to apply this instrument, the gathering of information, process, analysis, and dissemination. We actually comply with the entire cycle, but I also want to highlight mainly the integration of the institutions that where she knocked on the door, they immediately opened the doors to respond to this survey. And I present to you because without their participation, that has to do with the application of the migrational the application of these migrational instruments. This would have been possible. So I also want to highlight that each of these institutions in the data in the areas of migration, they have a responsibility, and for such purpose, each of these actually assigned a staff member that actually worked hand in hand with the staff that was assigned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Dominican Republic. Now, I know that my time is short, but let me skip to the results. The results that, of course, I will send to you so you can actually analyze. But I do want to highlight that in regards to number 1, domain adhesion to international standards and access to the rights of migrants, we actually measured access to basic social services and social security, the rights of family, labor rights, residency, the long term, and the pathway to citizenship. Equally, we actually measured the other variables by each of the domains. The results, as you can actually see, they were actually compared between the 2013 baseline and the progress that we had in 2017. Now, these results were afterwards submitted to the statistical office by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. and that they sought to submit this information to the statistical office for its validation. So basically, what we wanted is to actually provide the certification of the process that was carried out by the institution that at this moment it was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that actually gathered and collected us information. And this process, once it was sent to the National Statistical Office, was subjected to very rigorous data verification. So it had to comply strictly with all the testing and comparative analysis for this type of statistical study. So each statistical operation for our colleagues and friends that are not up to date with statistical information. So we can understand this quickly. Everyone knows what a census. It's a statistical process. Is a survey is also a statistical process. So when we actually gather information by instruments of data collecting that's seen into a survey, it's also a statistical operation. So the process had to comply with the rigorosities from the institution to actually verify these statistical operations. And in this case, the first thing that was carried out was a validation of the methodological basis that was supplied by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs through the consultant that was responsible of actually gathering and calculating that governance index. So the process also had the different direct consultations to each of the officials that were actually linked to the process, but also we had a complete mapping of the consolidated information from the answers from the data collected that was supplied by that consultant. Equally, for each of the surveys that were actually applied in which the answer had they actually had a product which was verified, they requested each of the institutions to submit a copy of the product in which they actually referred to. This means that if there is a migration policy in Dominican Republic, at the moment when we actually validate that question, the responsible institution on that migrational policy had to submit this. So with that said, even though they had a process, even though they might have a process, which is the case of the Dominican Republic, the migration policy, and it was, and that what my colleague actually mentioned before, it was not ready when the validation was ready. So the implications of this is that the answers that were provided as affirmative, so it varied in the validation process. And it happened successively for each of the questions. So the validation of the governance index, it was a weighted average of each of the questions by domain. So each domain was given 10 points, and these 10 points were divided in each of the questions, as you can actually observe on the screen right now. For example, in domain number 1, the question that addressed access to basic social services and Social Security, that it was also subdivided to access to sanitary or health assistance, access to education, and access to Social Security. So the 2 points that were given at the very beginning were actually divided among these 3 questions, and this gave us a 0.666%. Equally, for the case of family rights and labor rights, and successively throughout the rest, the results of the application from this methodology had actually resulted in each of the other questions were compared to the previous question, and this actually allowed that for each of the cases, the informants could actually verify the answer that was provided in 2013 and 2017 in regards to the question validated in 2013 and 2017. As you can see in this case, a few of these for the answers in 2017, 2013 rather, that we had long-term residents and residents in with permits of family reunion and under certain categories of residents with temporary work permits actually uh, varied in all of them, because the option of the reply or response for this case actually covered the whole component of that question. And that's exactly what actually happened for the other questions. I repeat, this survey was actually validated in the first survey that was done for the governance index initially. So the validation had a percentage of validated answers of 94%. Therefore, the office, in its report on validation, approved this as valid in the validation. And due to the fact that the questions did not vary significantly, you can see the comparison between both cases actually. So we didn't see a huge variation from the governance index when it was collected back then. We did this in the correct way according to the validation process. On the other hand, the as it was mentioned, um, on the application of the methodology for the governance index on matters of the SDGs, the same thing happened here in Dominican Republic. So in a specific case of goal 10.7, the the collection of information on the governance index actually resulted in a very significant variation in the feasibility of measurement of 10.7, 7.2, according to the number of countries that actually ensure. I'm sorry. Hold on. I can't see it clearly. It's kind of. It says that they actually applied policies through the application of migration policies that are well managed, actually. So in this indicator, I'm sorry, I think there's a mistake over here. I do apologize. I think this indicator, if I read this correctly, that we had about the feasibility, that we did not have how to calculate and how to measure this. It went to a feasibility level 2. So this is for 2018, the year 2018, 2019. Now, by the end of 2019, we completed the data. And as of today, this indicator, even though it has not been delivered an official report from the index matrix of our country, this indicator actually went to feasibility 1 due to the information that was gathered by this index from the indicators from the migration index. So I want to wrap up by stating that this indicator, the Dominican Republic has the obligation to strengthen this according that we saw that had weaknesses. So in this regards, I have to re-indicate about the migration strategy that actually was highlighted in this process, and we needed some more information to actually have this strategy complete. And that's exactly what happened in this case. And it also what happened with the other institutions that had the responsibility of carrying out or in charge of migration in the Dominican Republic. Thank you so much. Juan, thank you so much for your presentation. It clearly illustrates how effectively these methodologies are actually used by the governments for the decision making. So I think it's going to stimulate a lot. It's going to foster a lot of questions from the RCM. So I truly thank you for this. So let's go over to the presentation of Costa Rica by Eugenia Victor Sanchez. Thank you so much, Juan. If you want, you can mute your mic and we'll continue with Eugenia. Thank you so much, Flavio. Thank you much, everyone. Thank you. So we'll have a Q&A after the Costa Rica presentation. Eugenia Victor Sanchez, she has a licentiate in planning and a master's in administration. She's the chief of the institutional planning of the General Directorate of Migration and Immigration, which is an advising unit from the General Directorate that he participates in the design, follow-up, and implementation of policies, plans, programs, and projects that are institutional and inter-institutional, as well as in the design and assessment of the work processes, the analysis of the migration phenomenon in the country, and the ongoing institutional improvements. Eugenia has experience in high-impact projects directed to the migrant population and matters of human rights, and she actually works as a liaison for the National Council on Migration for following up on the goals on an integral migration policy. So, Eugenia, thank you so much. If I actually want to confirm with Renan, if you are online right now, do you have your mic open? Yes. Thank you so much, Eugenia. So you can activate your mic and you have the floor. Thank you so much, Eugenia. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So my presentation is a bit different. It's mainly focused on an event that the General Directorate of Migration actually launched last year, and based on September 2019, we actually want to do this yearly. So the goal for this year was to actually extend this to the RCM, but because of the conditions that we have, the global pandemic, well, we have certain limitations, of course, and we haven't discarded this, but we are actually assessing if it's possible to do this. And it's called Migration Workshop No. 1. So this was done in 2019, and it was called Approach to the Migrant Population in Situations of Vulnerability. So this, it's actually quite important. Can you go to the next slide, please? There we go. So we have an integral migration policy that goes back to 2013 to 2023. So of course, in 10 years, we see a migration phenomenon which is quite complex and dynamic, and we cannot just use the diagnosis that was used back in 2013. But we need to use different tools to actually update or streamline all these scenarios and to know exactly how the migration patterns are actually being used and how this is being impacted. So we have updates on the different policies, the diagnosis on the policy planning, which are 3 plans actually. We have migration studies that are actually carried out, and the migration workshop, which is going to be another scenario, which is going to help us to actually assess the situation of migration here in the country. And this is done because we are a receiving country by our nature, even though we are a transit country, just like the rest of Central America. And for immigration, we have a bit of immigration, and we have to address this as well. We've seen migrational flows which are quite complex, to be honest, since 2015 onward, or to this date actually, and we must carry out an integral approach of the different populations, because the different populations, the approach is a bit more complex. So we actually need to differentiate these, and we need to make this a bit more inclusive. Now, like protection, protecting rights, especially if we're talking about promoting a safe, orderly, and regular migration. So we're going to center ourselves on this migration workshop. The next slide, please. So as you can see that we actually see a lot of different themes. We actually launched the migration governance profile from Costa Rica, where we actually managed to recover a few good practices aspects to strengthen, and also indicators to attend migration governance. So we'll see this later on. I am not going to see the entire profile, just a few examples, because at the end, we'll talk about the workshop in general. We also launched the integral plan to attend the mixed migration flows in 2018, 2022, precisely to actually attend the different flows of extra-regionals and extra-continental flows, and to actually activate all the different mechanisms and protocols that the country actually has for migration of crisis issues. So for experiences, the good practices and challenges in situations of emergency, and that's from the CNE, the National Emergency Commission, and the presentation or submittal of results from the preliminary study of mixed migration flows of Nicaraguans in 2018, 2019. We'll see a few results of this study, which was seen in 2018. It was a migrational flow, which is quite important in Costa Rica, from people from Nicaragua. Next, please. So the launching of the immediate response plan for refugees, the migration context, which is done by the DGME, and actually presented the whole context at the data and statistical level at that moment from the DGME, the General Direction of Migration, the attention of migrant children, and the different protocols. We do this through different protocols. And the important to highlight is that these protocols are actually followed up on, and we actually generate data that serves us to the refuge in Costa Rica, especially for populations that are actually mainly represented, which is Venezuela, Salvador, and Nicaragua. The challenges on the integration of migrants into the country, human trafficking and smuggling, we're not going to talk because I don't have time. We're going to talk about all the different topics that are, or subjects rather, that we're seeing in the workshop, but I am going to refer to a few of them. Next slide, please. So when we launched the migration governance profile of Costa Rica, I think that we are all pretty clear with the first from the first presentation given by Rudy. I think the most important thing is that this index is going to allow us to have indicators to develop public policies that strengthen the governance structure and identify those good practices and potential improvement areas, and also to promote the dialogue on migration governance. I think one advantage that Costa Rica actually has, since we already have an integral migration policy since 2013, and not just that, but we have other policies that are actually articulated to this one, such as for like a society free of xenophobia and racism. So we have many institutions that are actually articulated on a transversal topic like the migration topic. So you can also observe a few institutions that actually participated, obviously, like the Costa Rica Social Security Bureau, the Municipal Advisory and Fostering Institute, the Public Education Ministry, the Ministry of Governance and Police, the IOM, that collaborated with us during the entire process, and the Vice Presidency of the Republic. So you can see the level that we actually work on in this regard. Next slide, please. So in this governance profile, of course, we just says the different, how are we addressing the rights of people, the integrated government focus, the alliances, the socioeconomic welfare, the mobility in the situations of crisis, and also reintegration of eligibility, which is integral to this part. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example, a quick example, so like in good practices, we actually elaborated at the educational level. We elaborated different protocols, everything that the public education ministry actually did. So we have a three-party commission integrated by migration, and the Children's Institute and Foreign Affairs Office. And we also have the Public Education Ministry. We're working with them with the regularization of minors, but we also have worked on a protocol to regularize the migrational situation of those people that actually study at the National Learning Institute, which are pretty much the majority adolescents, Social Security, which is the insurance from the government and from the states, and also the medical attention in irregular conditions, except that the naturalizations, and we had this at the constitutional level, everything that has to do with regular permanence according to the migrational categories and the different changes of migration conditions, and also family reunification. Not everything that has to do with human trafficking, and also in development potential. And Salvador actually has a huge experience in returned integration. Costa Rica, we are at the beginning steps of this, and also with the biometrics for border control, but especially focused on border security and the fight against smuggling and trafficking, on policies based on data with integral government focus. The important thing about this is that we have a National Migration Council. In the last session, we actually talked about, and there's a program from civil society who's a representative who actually forms part of this council as well, because our council has participation from civil society. So the return of Costa Ricans, we already have protocols that are implemented and improved from Foreign Affairs and the DGME, a social fund that actually allows integration projects of migrants and refugees, and also the return of Costa Ricans. Now, we also have a migration policy, and also the publication of statistics. This social fund is actually, several institutes are actually benefited to actually develop programs for the migrant population at the educational level, at the health level, at the public security, and also at the justice level from the Ministry of Justice. Next slide, please. In durable alliances to confront migration and similar issues, Costa Rica has had very interesting experiences, like the youth mobility program between Costa Rica and Canada, the exchange of migrational alerts and safety information between Panama and Costa Rica, the regional agreements on labor mobility with Nicaragua, and memorandums of understanding with other countries, especially they're mainly agro-industrial and domestic services. These are good practices that we actually had. And I believe that I firmly believe in the participation of the RCM in this, and something that as a country we actually feel very proud is a permanent forum on migrants and refugee population, which is coordinated with the National Ombudsman Office. So we also have civil society and the institutionality that's represented right there. Next slide, please. Now, in regards to the government profile and development potential areas, I think it's very important that you mentioned this. The national policy on the adaptation to climate change is something, it's an area of potential area that we need to develop, because the policy does not cover migrational movements caused by climate change, for example. So we need to actually update this. The emergency communication system actually mentions sometimes migrants, but not systematic and specifically. We can actually work on this a bit more, and the collection and dissemination of simplified data and quick data to the authorities is necessary to improve the delivery of assistance to immigrants in a situation of crisis. That almost the CNE, the National Emergency Council, actually does this and does not discriminate, but we want to have greater tools for this. Now, the advantage that we have is between the DGME and the CNE, the National Emergency Commission, we have a very good communication among these two institutions. You have 5 minutes left, Tanya. So here we have the plan for mixed migrational flows. I actually want to say that this actually comes out to attend the migrational flows that spiked in 2015, and this actually relaunched in 2018, 2019. Next slide, please, to see if we can see the data from the other studies and the challenges. So in this preliminary study of mixed migration flows from Nicaraguans, remember that Nicaragua actually saw a very difficult situation in April of 2018, and Costa Rica absorbed about 90% of the migrational intra-regional migrant movements from Nicaraguans. They actually represent not Nicaraguans, but also from all migration. They actually represent more than 10% of the national population. So this actually allowed to actually carry out a study in which it was practically the IOM and the IFAM that actually promoted this study. The next slide, please. Can you go on to the next slide, please? So what we actually did, we carried out surveys, and we actually surveyed the migrant population, and we actually surveyed the institutionality and also civil society as well. That they assessed the age, gender, academic level, migration regularization, place of residence, work situation, access to housing, health services, and humanitarian assistance, or humanitarian aid actually, and the findings. So in general terms, I think it's important to actually mention that the data actually show that we have people that they already worked in Nicaragua, but over here they actually had issues in Costa Rica. I mean, work issues because and things like this but they actually received collaboration and aid by civil society and from the state itself in regards to housing and training of information, because many times they don't know about the different processes that are required. Why don't you go ahead and skip several of the slides, if you will? This is what I just mentioned. Can you skip? Let's see. Can you skip to the very end? Migration conditions. So the majority. Hold on. Right here, I think this is very. Give me 1 second, because this actually assesses the different condition the livelihood conditions. So what they actually say that the housing conditions are actually, we're seeing with the pandemic right now, we have a reality that was already well known, and it's the overcrowding that many of the migrants are actually seeing in the different shelters that they're actually seeing. Next one, please. Go ahead and skip a few of them, please. Yeah, we already talked about that one. Next one, please. So these are different protocols that we have for children. So we actually follow up on them and actually generate the statistical data. Now, how do we use this information in streamlining the policy and adjustment of plan and creation of new ones to facilitate decision making and generate interinstitutional projects and of international cooperation? Because if there's no evidence, then it's going to be very difficult to actually have this cooperation in the follow-up of migration indicators of the SDGs and also on the objectives of the World Pact, in the studies on the migration phenomenon in the country, population, and determining their approach. And let me wrap up with the next slide. What are our challenges? The constant or ongoing monitoring of the migrational phenomena, the updating of migration indicator based on the governance profile, because this has to be updated. The follow-up on the indicators and the creation of strategic alliances, because all the information we simply don't have. There are institutions that have more information, and there are NGOs that also have information. So we actually have a project where we had the support of IOM, but we want to actually further this project through an integral platform on migration information, for example, where we can actually, might be more interactive, and we can actually assess the information. We also to assess data collection tools to improve them and to follow up on the policy instruments to update. Am I on time, Fabio? Thank you so much, Eugenia. Thank you so much for explaining in detail the situation in Costa Rica. I truly thank you. Also, Juan, if you want, you can mute your microphone, Eugenia. Thank you so much. Just stay right there. Just don't go anywhere. I also invite Juan Arias and Estela and Rudy, because we're gonna go ahead and start with the Q&A session. So I think it's been one of the most active panels with comments and questions, which is great. So we can go directly to the questions. And before that, I want to do a quick summary of what we presented and link these to a few of these consultative questions. I think it's very clear with the presentation from Rudy, Estela, Juan, and Eugenia, that the importance of generating data and evidence based on evidence, it's not a purpose in itself, but it's a vital resource for decision making, to feed decision making processes, like Eugenia, she mentioned in her last presentation, also because of an accountability process and transparency to different stakeholders on matters on migrational policy. Also, I think it's very, very clear from the presentations from the two countries and the interventions from the two other colleagues, the need that this data collection and processes is different fields, and not strictly a migrational flows that reflects from a country, but covers several different areas: health, access to services, demography, labor markets. I think that the next session of session on August 12th, the transversality of these sections will see how data are actually linked to different sectors. So hopefully you can actually accompany us next week. I also want to actually talk about go into the questions related to which are the countries that actually have these migrations. Well, I just want to clarify that by migrational policies, we understand specifically that a policy that's been written in a document, approved by the government of the respective country, and that's actually valid in that, and that's actually registered in this process that Estelle actually mentioned about the different analysis on migrational governance. So we're actually basing on the information that we actually collected in these analyses. We don't want to say that obviously that the other states that are here represented do not have migrational policies. Of course, that they have migration policies, or they're actually elaborating a document that's written and centered on migrational policy. We also have the case, and Stella can actually talk about more about this, about countries that, due to different reasons or competences, they should distribute the different functions in different institutions. So I think that that based on this program and other resources that we actually developed in the course of collaboration with the different national offices, we want to invite you that that the countries can actually advance a bit more in that direction of consolidating in one written document, an approved document by their executive powers, to consolidate a migrational policy. That like we've actually seen, of course, today, it's not. It's not the objective per se, of course, the design of this policy, but its implementation requires a huge effort from different sectors, and obviously their assessments, and that's why these methodologies that we present today are tremendously useful for this purpose. So I think that I wrap up with a comment that we actually mentioned on one of the questions of how maybe Rudy can actually expand on this. How can we actually develop the issue on the MGIs locally? So I think this is something that's quite interesting that we're actually trying to actually work on, and I went with different countries in Latin America. Particularly, we're actually in Mexico right now with Chihuahua and Oaxaca, developing that example. But we're also in the next following month in the regional framework on migration. We're going to work with this process with Costa Rica and Guatemala, and we also know that Dominican Republic also has a very useful experience in this regard. So the invitation is you can actually approach the IOM offices through the program, and we could actually contact you in this regard, because the application of these MGIs locally requires a familiarization with the methodology and then a coordinated exercise with the different institutions of the government. Luis, if it's okay with you, I think that we have many different questions so that our colleagues can actually answer all of these. Fabio, thank you so much for your for moderating this excellent panel, and thank you all the panel members for your excellent presentations. I just want to remind you the dynamic of this Q&A session. Fortunately, we have enough time, I believe, so I'll go in order and I'll prioritize the questions that we have in the chat. And as of right now, you can also present your questions, but we'll ask you to actually do this in the participant tab. Just write down your names so you can actually have the order of the questions that actually come up. So Rudy, we have a question for you actually, Rudy, and it's from Fayola Miranda. What is the process or initial steps to apply the MGIs at the local level? So in terms of coordination, for example, should we coordinate this directly with the economist delegates unit or IOM? Or Rudy, if you can actually talk a bit more about this. Look, thank you so much for your question. I think that we have two pathways to actually start with an exercise on the MGIs at the local level. First can be through contacts that we as IOM we actually have at the local level. In other words, we can actually talk to the local authorities, and then once we have an agreement, the next phase would be to see with the national government if they can actually advance and form that if they are in agreement that we can continue with this type of exercise. The other path, it could be through the national government, in a sense that, I need to mention this type of tool that we have available, and it might be useful for the larger cities that are the receiving points of the most of the international migrants, and also for the national migrants that come or flee to the big cities. So this type of consultation or question or information, I think that's how you can actually proceed. Thank you so much, Rudy. Next question is for Estela. They ask, Saidi Mendes actually asks, what do you refer to generate a matrix? And there's been recurring question about the survey, if you can actually talk more about those countries that actually have this policy. Look, thank you so much, Luis Alonso. Let me go back to the second question actually first. And I think that Fabio has explained quite extensively on the development of these policies, that not necessarily the question refers to if we do have policies to manage migration, which it does exist in each country. Each country has had their own advancement and their own process individually. It's something that's being reflected in the report. So in this regard, my invitation would be before talking about this, just look out for the publications of the reports, and you will be able to see the information more detailed and contextualized. Now, in regards to the other question about the matrix, well, I was referring to a database where all the information will be consolidated from other countries on migration governance. This database will feed a dashboard or a digital dashboard, and we can actually update this in real time. So it's a database that will actually allow to filter the information per country and by themes, and see this in a more graphical way. I don't know if I clarify your question or if I answered the question. Thank you so much, Estela. Luis, yes. I just want to add to her answer. Thank you so much, Estela. I think that you talked about methodology very clearly. I think that according to the collected information as of today, in the different analysis on the MGIs that we're doing this today. And instead, as he mentioned, we're still in the final phase of preparation of these reports. We have the confirmation that 3 countries actually have a written document with a policy: Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Costa Rica, effectively. So we also want to highlight the fact that other countries that right now are actually working in this document. It's Belize, or to work with Panama, and at this moment with Honduras is actually working on this. So I think that we actually talked about this from the example from Honduras. They're actually in the design stage of this. So I want to maybe you can clarify the fact that the reference to the data that we actually mentioned at the very beginning is the data that we have today in the analysis of migration governance. But clearly, we actually know that there are other countries actually working on this, and we'll see many more other countries with a written and approved document on migration governance matters. So I think it's very important to highlight that in the RCM, that in a forum like RCM, the fact that a few countries don't have a recognized document at the executive decree level doesn't mean that a country does not have a migration policy. I think that the legislative apparatus actually constitutes actually part of this guidelines and memos, and all this forms part of that policy. I think these instruments are actually quite useful for the exchange of all these experiences, of course. I also want to thank Marco Saida for his question, and also thank you for your intervention, Saida Mendez. She's asking if these presentations will be delivered to everyone, will be available. Well, yes, that question is for me actually. So all these presentations will be available on the eCampus, and if you will join us in the future, you'll probably see the YouTube video of this panels, and so the YouTube videos in both languages, in English and Spanish, will be in the eCampus and also in the YouTube from the RCM, the YouTube channel from RCM. So we'll invite you to actually subscribe to our YouTube channel from the RCM. Elena Rea from ROCOM, that's another question for Stella. How the proposed system can actually be integrated and the reports in the context of the human rights treaties and the migration agreements around the world. Elena, I'm sorry, Stella, not Elena. I'm sorry, it's Stella. It's a question from Helena to Stella. Look, excellent question. I think that the different frameworks there we have, or international treaties, like the PMMM or the 2030 agenda, actually work as a basic conceptual frameworks to formulate the methodology. So a few of these questions are included in the survey that the 300 question baseline questions survey specifically actually covers a few of the objectives in the PMM, and also to the 2030 agenda specifically in goal 10.7. So we actually see these in a question form to identify if the countries are actually working in the alignment according to these frameworks or not. Another aspect, which is quite important, I believe, is that in the documents that we're actually seeing right now, or we're doing right now for 2020, they include these 8 countries from Mesoamerica. I'm sorry, from the RCM, I apologize, are actually generating as an annex, internal annex, internal documents, annexes that actually talk about the progress from the countries, made from the countries in regards to the follow-up on the SDGs that specifically refer to migration and to the PMM goals. These are annexes that were requested by a few of the national offices. These are documents that will be kept internal for the national offices and from the different states where they actually request such documents. But also, you can actually see these through the platform. Thank you, Marcela, and thank you, Elena, for your question. Gabriel Rodriguez from Marrocom. You can open your mic and ask your question, and also Gabriela, if you can actually ask your question, please. I think she muted her mic. Well, maybe while we wait for her, yes, maybe she wants to add to that question. I think it's been a very interesting discussion today, and actually excites us to see the interest in this topic. There's something that I think that's worthwhile to emphasize on the indicators, and the different analysis of needs, which is its usefulness and its functions. I think that these methodologies and these tools, um, we don't have the intention. I think the countries are not interested in actually doing some sort of comparisons or ranking between the countries. I think it's a process of learning. It's a process of improvement in the implementation of these policies, constantly by the use of data. Gabriela, if you could give us just 1 second, please. Thank you so much. If you could just mute your mic for just 1 second. Thank you so much, Gabriela. I just let me finish with my idea, and you can go ahead. So, what have we seen? And let me just mention about the experience that we actually seen in Mexico, particularly with the implementation of these governance index at the local level in Chihuahua and in Oaxaca. So, what you see in the nexus, which is truly interesting and coordinated with the central authorities, like Rudy actually mentioned, with the UPM and REAP in Mexico, with the and also with the entities at the local level with the CONAFAM, uh, the National Council of National Coordination, and the Migration Attention Unit, and with the respective units of migration in Chihuahua and Oaxaca. And we actually sat down with them to work on the methodology and to see the indicators carried out by Rudy and Estela on the response to those indicators. And that's just a process of sitting down with the different institutions at the local level. Truly, it's extremely beneficial to actually generate this information independently of the results actually generated at the end of the reports, which are quite valuable in itself. But the process of learning is in the application of these methodologies, and we've seen very interesting results in this regard from the two states. So I just wanted to mention this because sometimes with these methodologies, I think that the important thing is the find the results, and the whole process of learning is seen throughout the application of this. Thank you so much, Fabio. I think it's this actually also complemented with the message from Alexander Bani in the chat that according to the OM, based on a study from 49 countries around the world, only 55% of them, 50% of the national migration in a document. Only 49% of these actually represent that these strategies are actually aligned with the national strategies of development. Of course, that we talk about public policies, and at the regional level, we're not competing with each other. No, as a matter of fact, with a dynamic like this one at the sanitary level, from the COVID pandemic, it's not seen. It's not to see exactly which country actually wins with less death, but it's rather about the regional cooperation at the migrational level will have a challenge during the pandemic and after the pandemic. So, Gabriela, welcome to, if you can open your mic now and ask your question, please. Look, thank you so much. Well, apparently she's having some technical issues with her connection. Meanwhile, Gabriela, if you can go ahead and connect yourself. So, Fabio, we have another question from Saida Mendez, where it says, is the work in Oaxaca and Chihuahua, where can we actually see this? If you can actually share this information. Thank you so much, Saida. Effectively, we're actually in the data collection phase, like I actually mentioned from Rudy and Ceci mentioned, these two tools or these two methodologies have a very important phase of a very complex data collection, because it covers, like mentioned in the presentation from Juan and Eugenia, covers different institutions. We're still in that phase. We're actually finishing in Chihuahua and Oaxaca, of finishing data from the different institutions. We need to validate that information, and we hope that that September, October, we can actually have a quick draft of reports that must be validated by the authorities, and most likely we'll be able to share this before the end of the year, and with everyone who's interested. And also, I wanted to mention that Sadina and Luis, that next year, Guatemala and Costa Rica, we're going to implement this methodology of the MGI analysis at the local level, so you can actually stay posted on this. Thank you, Fabio. Gabriela, let's go ahead and try again. If you have any issues, you can write it down in the chat room if you want. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Gabriela, if you can actually, why don't you write down your questions because we have some issues with the connection. So, Glenda Mariaga from Honduras, she has a question for the panel members from Costa Rica and Dominican Republic. She's asking, Honduras says that, can you mention about the importance of knowing about the weaknesses in the process of elaboration of the migration policies that have been implemented? In other words, what is not feasible? I think the question is quite interesting. Juan, the floor is yours, and then Eugenia Vito can actually answer this as well. Well, thank you very much. I think that certainly enough in the process, like everything else, we have weaknesses and we have room for improvements. Of course, during the process of the review of the instrument that was actually implemented uh, for the index on governance. It was, I think, the documentation specifically with the specific line items, basically the protocol of information exchange between the different institutions that are responsible for the application on the migration government's application are actually being elaborated right now. That was detected along the process because there was in my country, there was, maybe it happens in other institutions as well. Everything that has to do with the provisioning of data. We need procedures, standardized procedures, to actually comply with the different policies that we actually have in Dominican Republic in regards to migration. As as we actually indicated, we have a law specifically that's created by the National Migration Council, presided by the Ministry of Police, Law 85 -04, that actually establishes the guidelines, the migration management at the institutions that actually form that council. So in this regard, we still have pending protocols that has to do with data exchange between institutions to ensure the compliance of migrants. Even though we have a very good legislative framework on migration, we have different laws for this. So Fabio actually indicated that everything that has to do with policies and migration strategy must be written in a document and reflected in a document. That we have this in different laws actually, and the strategy that I referred to before is in the process of being validated, that actually gathers or coordinates all these judicial frameworks that we have, all those laws that we have in our judicial framework in regards to migration. So what we need to do is to integrate all those frameworks that communicate amongst each other through the different protocols of exchange between each of the institutions. And so the receiving institute that has to do with safeguarding people, the part that has to do with the documentation that is born out of the instruments that provide the approval, so that someone is asking for the nationality, all the aspects that has to do with generating or issuing passports, rather, all the different instruments that are used in the day to day, so that these people can actually, when they actually request access to the protection granted, but by each of the legal instruments, can actually be provided. So unfortunately, in our country, as you well know, we have different situations of migrants that they do not have documents, and this is precisely that in the international scenario, as it comes out that we need some sort of attention. But I think this is the minimum, because as someone actually acquires the instrument that allows them to circulate through the different cities that we have in my country, so the situation will be regularized, and we respect their rights. But I think that's the only I think that's the only missing thing that we have, to by exchanging information through the different stakeholders in the system. Then we can actually correct that process. As a matter of fact, I apologize. I think the question to Rudy may I briefly intervene that from the country optic and not from the coordinating rector institution. So how can you apply the migration governance indexes can be applied so the local experience that we actually have, it's not easy to coordinate with the different stakeholders that has to do with this topic. The main issue over here is that the rectoring entity in my country, for example, it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, must assume the responsibilities of implementing this, and this, after they assumed this, it actually favored us. The IOM actually benefited with this to apply this migration index application. So what I want to actually mention is that it's a process that must go hand in hand with the international organization and also at the local level. And as Fabi actually mentioned, the internal communication between the different institutions sometimes it's makes this extend, the process extends when we actually want to develop or implement rather something new. And of course the majority when the majority of us when we see something different, we have resistance, and to simulate this it entails a whole process. So in our local experience was that, so the rectoring body assumed the responsibility and going along with the process so the other stakeholders can actually integrate into the process as well. Thank you so much, Juan. Eugenia. Okay. So Gabriela, just give me 1 second, so we can have Eugenia, if you can actually go on and give me your comments. Look, in the case of Costa Rica, the and like was mentioned by my colleagues and Luis Alonso, as you mentioned, also by Fabio, it's not that we didn't have migration policies. Of course, we have them. The advantages that our regulatory framework forces us to have a policy. It also indicates that at least that's the minimum that we can have. That's minimum parameters, and the National Migration Council is the one who has to propose this. Now, it has an articulating factor, which is the DGME. And when we actually carried out this policy, it was Luis Alonso who was in charge of that. So I always say that he's the father of this policy because he's the one who actually promoted this. So our main limitation, I can say that it's the consensus or the agreement on the different stakeholders, but not just that. It's precisely that was what didn't allow the policy and the plan of the action plan would come out in the same time frame. So the policy came out in 2013, and it turns out the plan came out years afterwards, and this really affects this. So the dynamics that we were actually working on to a certain point, it was actually separated, and we need to recover this connection. So this was the main limitation, if I recall correctly, and also at the planning level. At the planning level, I can also say that it's the need that the greater umbrella under this is the policy, and we need to lower this to the operational part, the political plan, 3 plans actually, and we need to cascade down this to the operational side, so we can see the commitments from the different institutions, and besides this, the determinations of the different institutional liaisons, for example. So it's a department, my department, the planning department is the one who actually follows up as a collaborator of the council to the different national goals on this policy. Even though our policy has 2 more plans, which is integration and mixed flows, but these 2 plans are actually articulated to the policy, but they are from the DGME who actually coordinates these directly. But in general terms, that's a recommendation that I might have, is that both of them can come out at the same time. Thank you so much, Eugenia. Let's cross our fingers to see if Gabriela can actually ask a question without being cut off. So thank you so much for the opportunity. That I've had some connection issues over here. So quite interesting, the different presentations. Quite interesting, to be honest with you. my concern, because of my specialty from protocol and society, is that all the international commitments that the countries actually have in regards to human rights. So I see it very clear. I don't see very clear, except for Costa Rica, that they do have it written and incorporated. I honestly don't see the other countries, and in the study presented by IOM, but I mean, in all this process, I want to remind everyone exactly what's the concept of governance of of migration that you are using, migration governance that you're using. If it's governance, it's with civil society, and and you should not divide civil society from the academia, because civil society, we also have private businesses, the community. So I do feel that we still need some sort of incursion into this from civil society. And in Costa Rica, I know that's a bit clearer. So I just have two recommendations. First is the Migration Governance Index. We need to define the concept of governance. Second, of management, because we call management for everything: the management of trafficking, managing smuggling, migration management, everything management. So what are we referring to when we say management? So I want, from my perspective of migration and human rights, we should be more specific when we refer to management. I don't see it as clear, except for Costa Rica. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gabriela. And because of time, let's use Gabriela's question to wrap up from our panel members. And so I'll pass the floor to IOM, and then Dominican Republic, and the countries, and then Costa Rica. And also, Fabio, of course, you're invited to actually give us your assessment. So, Rudy, look, thank you so much. And now to clearly answer to Gabriela's questions from Rocom, Costa Rica should highlight 2 points: the migration governance framework indicates very clearly about the importance that we must have. In other words, the countries must have in regards to the respect from the respect on human rights. So I think this is a fundamental principle from the migrational governance um, part, and this also reflected in principle number one. And also work with civil society and with partners. I think it's a key element that from the governance framework that's reflected in principle number three. And when the country actually decides on carrying out this exercise, there's specific questions in regards to both topics. So um, so these two aspects are actually included in the analysis. And as an observation, I think that's I think that's the answer to the question from Gabriela. But I also want to make an observation in regards to everything that we actually discussed, which is so this exercise of migration governance. It's not something that's done once. The idea is to actually do this every 2 to 3 years to see exactly what's the process like that the countries or a country has gone through, to see exactly what was attained, what was achieved, and what was not achieved in the last 2 or 3 years. And as a matter of fact, as part of IOM, we actually we're going to start next year with an initiative to see or to follow up actually on a few countries that actually want to do this. And how have they implemented, and how have the results from these exercises, with the purpose of actually improving the implementation and identifying dates and to share or exchange good practices. So thank you so much, and thank you. Thank you so much, Rudy, for your answer. Estela, you have the floor for your last remarks. Thank you so much, Luis Alonso. Listen, maybe just to echo what Rudy actually mentioned, I think that I just want to conclude the fact that all these documents, the one that we talked about, all these reports, the from the MGI, and also on the needs report, these are tools. These are tools that generate data and generate information, and ideally serve as a basis for development of policies and initiatives that help the states and the different stakeholders to actually work on a good governance on migration. In this regard, I also want to highlight that these are tools at the service of the RCM and to foster and to promote. So you can actually check these documents because ideally we would ask you that this is information used and placed at the service of the decision makers. Thank you. And along that line, that Estela mentioned, that in the in the RCM website, we have all the documents divided throughout 25 years. They're actually at the website. We I need to highlight about the SDGs in Guatemala, and you can find this in the thematic page in our website. So Juan, and then Eugenia, and then Fabio would wrap up. Look, thank you so much, Luis, and I have to add to what my colleagues actually said previously. The migration governance tools, they've been supported and backed up by the judicial framework of our countries, and that's the way it happens in my country. So each instrument indicates the corresponding action according to the theme. In our case, for example, specifically with the border, and so I think that we were worldwide news because of the decree of 2013, where the government actually created a new commission to deal with the Haitian population, in which we actually articulated precisely one of the guidelines from the law mentioned at the very beginning, the 285-04, created by the National Migration Council, and based on that law to actually regulate and to document the different foreigners or foreign nationals in the country. It's precisely the different instruments or the different indicators on governance, on migration, and governance indicators actually reflected that if the countries are actually in compliance with the different themes mentioned by Rudy a few seconds ago, if they have this in writing, the actioning of each of these themes. So based on this, we've actually developed these different policies, and it's reflected in a document that is the strategy to actually indicate how to actually carry out each of these frameworks that actually go to the different themes as previously indicated by Rudy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Juan. Eugenio, Victor. So I would reiterate what I actually wrapped up with what I said at the very end of my presentation. I think that everything that helps us to measure what we're doing, in what position, what are we doing, and especially on the governance index allows us to actually help areas for improvements or opportunities for improvement. And that's why we actually mentioned that we need to assess the governance indexes once again to see if those that we actually detected are in fact we advance on that, if we actually advance on those. So even though we have a migration policy and the policy actually has its own indicators, we need to generate another type of instruments that allows us to actually measure or to acknowledge or know exactly what that trend or the behavior of that, if the application of the measures that we're actually taking or assuming are being effective or not. So I think that it's a process of ongoing construction from our countries, and this has to be done in an integral way, with the participation from the different stakeholders, of course, from civil society, from the local governments, from the institutions, and the population in general. Thank you, Eugenia. And as a matter of fact, Gabriela actually mentioned, besides civil society, the academia and the private sector, and how a parallel to this, and part of the activities, RCM with IOM and ILO will start a series of different panels with the private sector on labor migration, and we're actually working together with IOM and ILO, and we actually communicated this to the different countries, and we notified about this work. So for the focal points that have not done so, please submit your nominations for participation before August 14th. And with that said, I'll pass the floor to Fabio. Luis, thank you so much. Basically, I want to truly thank Eugenia, Juan, for sharing your experiences for both countries. I think it's been truly illustrative of how the tools that you actually explained from Rudy and Stella actually serve and help the countries, the different stakeholders, and how they can actually use this throughout the implementation process and follow-up and assessment of these policies. I think that we complied with the objective of today's panel. It's been a truly interesting participation from civil society and the panel members, and reiterate what Gabriela actually mentioned, that these tools actually respond to an integral vision of the governance, of mining education governance from the states that participate together with other stakeholders under ample or a wide, and this is a great invitation for next Wednesday, where we actually talk precisely on those links between migration governance and the policy and other policies from the sector. So I invite you to actually see you in next week. Thank you so much, Luis. Thank you, Fabio. And also on behalf of the, and your representation, Rudy and Estela, I truly want to thank IOM for the report, for their support for this general training, and also for the PPT, for the accompaniment that FXT provided us, and of course, Juan and Eugenia that accompanied us today in the morning with their interventions. And also, I want to thank the civil society, ARROCOM, that accompanied us today, and also the technical secretariat from the CCM, from the South American Conference on Migration that's actually joined us as, and also I wanted to thank to the people that actually help us so that this activity can actually have all the possible connection. And Ron, our interpreter, thank you for his intervention and his help in the intervention, and Renan Rodas from the executive committee. So thank you so much, everyone. Please accompany us in next week in the very last panel. And those of us who have not completed the eCampus course, please complete the course as part of this program, the stream program. So we will deliver a certificate of participation. So, but you need to complete this of attending these online sessions and also completing the course. So please do this before the due date. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day and a great week. Thank you so much. Bye bye now.